Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for logging in to today's webinar, Living Well Online Health Series, The Healing Power of Connection for Mental, Emotional, and Physical Health. This web series is brought to you by 5210 Plus, Gallatin County, and Bozeman Health. Bozeman Health as the Community Engagement Coordinator. We are so excited to be offering our online Living Well series and sincerely thank you for your engagement and participation today. Before I turn the presentation over to Angela, I want to first cover some logistics about using Zoom. Angela will present for 20 minutes, and then we will have 5 to 10 minutes available for question and answer. Everyone has been muted upon entry to the webinar. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation. After the presentation, there will be an opportunity for Q&A, and at this time, we encourage you to unmute yourself to ask a question to the presenter. If you are having any tech issues, please use the chat box feature, and I will communicate with you directly to get the tech issues resolved. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared on Bozeman Health's YouTube channel. I encourage you to complete our post-presentation survey, which will be emailed to you later today after the completion of the presentation. Finally, please check back in to Bozeman Health's website at bozemanhealth.org/community-education to see our upcoming Living Well presentations. You can also follow us on social media. We have Facebook and Instagram accounts for both Bozeman Health and 5210 Plus Gallatin. So Angela has an MS and is an LCPC, and she strives to help community members turn struggles and difficulties into opportunities for growth and healing. She has been working with individuals, families, and communities for nearly 20 years and continues to provide consultation and training to law enforcement, businesses, schools, and other community organizations to better understand and address the support and mental health of those they work with, serve, and care for. Now, it is my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Angela. Thanks so much.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really happy to be part of this Live Well series. So as Danica mentioned, most of my professional background has been in mental health. So I've worked in mental health as a licensed clinical counselor for about 20 years. I've also worked in consultation, leadership consultation, and as an educator as well. And so this topic of the healing power of connection is one that is professionally important to me, but it's also personally important to me, as connection is one of my driving values as a human and as a professional educator and counselor. And so what I've seen, the power of connection, I've just seen healthy connections transform communities, families, relationships of all kinds. And so when Danica approached me about giving this talk, I was very excited to share this information. And I happened to be reading a book at the time, which we'll talk about later, which is also the inspiration for this talk. So yeah, and I know that we had some people registered for today, but I know that Danica also shared that there are a fair amount of people that watch this later. So, so I'm excited for those who are here live and also for those who will watch at a later time. And we can go to the next slide. So connection is the key to the changes we wish to see. And I live by this motto. I say this often to patients, clients, students, people that I care about. And when I think of connection, I think of not only connection outside of ourselves, connection to other people, relationships with other people. I also think of the connection that we feel and experience within ourselves when we know what we need, when we're taking good care, when we are taking strides to grow and heal in various different ways. So connection is evident in a lot of different arenas, as these bullet points show. So in therapy, when we're thinking in therapy, connection, the quality of a relationship with the therapist is the #1 curative factor of therapy. So definitely the type of therapy. So whether it's cognitive behavioral or psychodynamic or whatever it is, there are various types of therapy. Those are useful too for different diagnoses, but they aren't the number one curative factor. The number one factor for recovery and healing is the quality of the relationship. And we're also finding that more in the medical profession as well. There are more and more studies looking at compassionate care as something that increases health outcomes for patients. And again, as we're establishing healthy habits, whether it's weight loss, exercise, or meditation, as we're moving through life's phases, grieving losses, changing and growing as individuals, recovering from substances, wanting to grow in our professions, build skills, all of these things that we take on as humans are fortified by healthy connections. You can go to the next slide. So this is the book that has inspired this talk for me. So while personally and professionally, I'm driven to understand, know, read up on connection, this book has also just offered me such a wealth of information. So I really highly encourage you to read it if you're interested in this topic and learning more. It's a great read. And so this book together is by Dr. Vivek Murthy. So he was the Surgeon General for the United States. And he includes a lot of studies in the book, which I will talk about. So pretty much any study that I talk about through this talk is from the book, unless I say otherwise. So basically what Dr. Murthy found when he took his post as Surgeon General, he set out just to learn more about the health issues that were affecting Americans. And he expected, there were certain conditions that he expected to face time and time again, and that was the opioid crisis, obesity, heart disease, mental health. Those were the health issues that he expected to find. And so when he took his post, he did town halls, interviews, went across the country, gathering stories and information. And what he found was surprising to him. So while he found these health conditions that he expected, he also found another condition that he didn't expect, and that it was loneliness. He observed loneliness to be at the heart of nearly all of the health crises that he was investigating. So in the book, he talks about a study by Dr. Julianne Holt-Lunstad. And so I do have some notes, so I'll be looking at my notes throughout the time just to make sure I get the details straight. So basically, Dr. Holt-Lunstad set out to conduct a large-scale study. So she looked at 148 studies around loneliness and health outcomes. And these studies contained over 300,000 participants. So it's a pretty healthy sample, a number of studies that she looked at. And so what she found was that strong social relationships are linked to reducing premature death. The opposite of that was true as well, and that is that weak social relationships increase premature death. And so when she looked at lacking social connections and their contribution to health risks, she found that loneliness contributed to our health risks at the same, if not more higher rates than smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, and excess alcohol consumption. So definitely a case there for strengthening our connections. So in terms of emotional and mental health, what we know is that healthy support systems and early intervention, which definitely hinges on connecting with others, they increase a positive prognosis for people with emotional mental health conditions. What we know is that isolation and loneliness worsens prognosis. It makes it more difficult to heal or live with mental and emotional health issues. In the book, Dr. Murthy talks about a study around suicidality by the CDC. And I've seen similar numbers to this just in our Montana studies around suicide. And what we know is that in Montana, we have higher than the national average. Our rates of suicide are higher than the national average. But nationally speaking, 54%, so I'll back up. So what we know about suicidality is that for about 46% of people who die by suicide also had an existing diagnosis of a mental health condition. So again, the other side of that is also true, and this is what the CDC found, was that 54% of people did not have a mental health diagnosis. People who died by suicide or attempted suicide did not have a mental health diagnosis. And so what they also found was that of the additional risk factors for suicidality, that social isolation and disconnection is among the greatest risk factor for people who are struggling with suicidality. So again, life and death, the stakes are high when it comes to disconnection and loneliness. And then the last piece is that incorporating a humanistic approach to health and well-being pays dividends. And so definitely, I'm seeing this in leadership circles, I'm seeing this in mental health, and also in the medical community, that people are starting to spend more time, money, and effort around personal connections in the work world and in medicine. So for example, there is a center out of Boston called the Schwartz Center for Compassionate Care. And so the Schwartz Center is really focusing on compassion for patients and medical staff, and also medical staff just to increase the care and health experiences of others. So anytime we can incorporate a humanistic approach in the things that we do, knowing a person's name, greeting them with a smile, eye contact, taking the extra couple minutes just to understand what really matters to them, it pays dividends. Next slide. So when we look at the statistics and the data, we see how important it is to be connected. So when we think of loneliness and disconnection, what does it feel like? So in preparation for this talk, I decided to do a quick informal poll. It was a Facebook poll, and we'll talk about Facebook later as far as, or in terms of connection. But so I did an informal Facebook poll, totally anonymous, and asked people to share with me 3 words or phrases that describe disconnection and loneliness to them. And this is what they said. These are the answers that people shared. And so with word clouds, what the words that are bigger, larger, are the words that have multiple responses. So what stands out when I look at this word cloud is sadness, anxiety, emptiness, and even fear or feeling scared. And so if you are watching this or watching this at a later time, I ask you to consider with these words, what stands out to you? Are these words that you would use as well? Is there anything that surprises you? Yeah, and just to think for, just spend a moment or two reflecting on that. I think one really important piece about disconnection, but the other side, connection, and this phrase is being used a lot more. It's becoming a popular phrase, but the phrase is that we are wired for connection. And it's popular because it's true. The truth is that as humans, we are wired for connection. We have hormonal systems and specific neurons um, whose jobs are to make sure that we are able to bond and connect with others. And the evolutionary reason behind that is that if we are connected, if we are part of a group, then that ensures our survival, that it keeps us alive, it keeps us fed, it keeps us cared for. So we are wired for connection. When we are disconnected, it is experienced on a visceral level. So, and those are the words that we see here. These are these visceral experiences that we have. Exhausted, achy, lonely, scared, all of those. These descriptors are very, very common descriptors around what it feels like to feel like you aren't part of a group, or may not just may not feel cared for or connected. So we'll go to the next slide. So with loneliness and connection, within the book Together, through Dr. Murthy's research and also speaking with experts around loneliness, 3 dimensions of loneliness arose for him or emerged. And those 3 are intimate, relational, and collective loneliness. And so one piece about loneliness and connection, or loneliness in particular, is that we all have unique experiences of loneliness, that no 2 people feel it identically in the same way or to the same intensity level. And so when we are lonely, we are often feeling lonely in one or more of these 3 dimensions. And so with intimate loneliness, what we are craving is a deeper emotional connection with someone. So an intimate partner, a soulmate, or a friend that we can share our dreams with, or our fears, someone who we can be honest with about our inner experiences and who we are. When we are lonely on a relational level, what we are wanting or what we are seeking or needing are social connections. So camaraderie, friendship, people to go out with, to do certain things with, have a conversation, exchange ideas with. That is the relational dimension of loneliness. And the third is collective or communal loneliness. And this is when we long for a community, when we long for being part of a larger web of people, whether it's a neighborhood or a cultural community. We wish to be part of something larger, like-minded people who have similar interests or habits or experiences of the world. And that's the communal. So when we look at the visceral experience of loneliness, we're wired for connection. Connection definitely enhances our health and well-being. But does that mean that loneliness and disconnection are 100% altogether bad things? And the answer to that is that no, that loneliness and disconnection aren't altogether bad things. While it can be difficult to feel them, they are protective more than bad. And so what I mean by that is that when loneliness is protective, what I mean is that loneliness signals to us our unmet needs. So when we have unmet connection needs in one or more of these areas, then what we feel when we feel lonely and disconnected is urging us to act in our own well-being and to care for ourselves in this way. In short, it signals to us what we need. Next slide. So I'm gonna move my picture box here so I can read this. So with connection, here is a definition of connection by researcher and author Brene Brown. This definition is not in the book, although her research is in the book, but this definition is not. But I love this definition. Connection, to Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown, is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. So what I love about this connection, or what I love about this definition of connection, is that it speaks to the fact that connection is possible across intimacy levels and within the 3 dimensions and in our everyday life. So it isn't all long-term soulmate, you know, our hearts are on fire kind of intimacy that feeds connection. Connection can happen, you know, as we're going through our daily round, as we have an exchange with the person at the grocery store, or you know, we check in with a coworker and say, "Oh, how are you doing?" You know, or, "Oh, I noticed this about you. How have you been?" So, connection is possible in a variety of different ways and different levels of intimacy with the people we know long term, but also with strangers or people that we have maybe shorter exposure and experiences with them. Next slide. So the flip side of what disconnection feels like is the question, what does connection feel like? So in the same informal anonymous poll that I conducted just a couple of days ago, I asked people, again, to give 3 descriptors or phrases that describe connection, what connection feels like. And this is what arose. And again, the larger words are the words with multiple responses. So what stands out to me, definitely acceptance, warmth, and love were the most common or were the most repeated descriptions. So again, as you're watching this or listening to this, I ask you to consider what connection feels like to you. How do you know when you're connected? How do you know when there is a connection with someone? What does it feel like? What does it feel like physically? What does it feel like emotionally? And just consider that, because there are ways, again, each of us experiences disconnection and connection differently. So while there are some universal or more common experiences, we also have our very own unique experiences. So consider what that means to you. Next slide. And so with genuine connection, reason I wrote this slide this way, what is genuine connection, is that I was hoping to really get at what are the really, again, genuine, authentic connections that support our health and well-being over time. So you would just click again and it'll bring some more up. There are a few more bullet points with this one. I'm not sure if they're showing. There they are. Okay. So some quality, yep, all 3 of it, and then one more. We'll just go through all 3 of them together. So the genuine, healthful, sustaining connections share a few qualities. So one is mutuality, that the bonds, interactions, relationships are mutual, that there's a give and take, that the people involved in the relationship or in the exchange are both giving and receiving in service of that connection. And the next one is that it's respectful, that people's boundaries, their well-being, their autonomy is respected and honored in the relationship or in the connection. And thirdly, that it's nurturing, that there is that renewable feeling to it, that that we could keep giving and receiving in a way that feels valuable, that feels fulfilling. So another piece about connection is that connection is culturally defined as well. So as individually we experience connection and disconnection in unique ways, we also culturally can experience connection differently too. So within a family or within a work setting or even community or societal norms. So for so a little bit more about that is that there's a continuum of social exposure and social interactions that can fall in line when people set or establish their cultures of connection. And so in work or in organizations, culture essentially is how the organization and to what extent an organization is okay with connection and interaction and a humanistic approach to people. So an organization that has maybe more authoritarian or top-down leadership is going to approach connection much differently than an organization that has a servant leader or someone who is more concerned with the well-being and holistic needs of the people that work for them than kind of with their own needs or focuses. So, or they share wanting to be successful, but also wanting their people to be successful as well. And then regarding societal norms, there are some cultures that put the collective well-being in front of individual well-being, and then there are other cultures that value independence more than the collective, and that can set different norms for connection as well. And I think I've said this already, we have unique needs and thresholds around connection and disconnection. And that just mostly has to do with our temperament, with maybe the templates that were set in our families and our communities during our formative years, and personal preference to an extrovert, connection to an extrovert, or levels of connection to an extrovert are different than the levels needed to sustain an introvert. Next slide. So, so I've shared the studies, made a case for connection. And if connection is so important for mental, emotional, and physical health, then what gets in the way? Because there definitely is evidence that we are, as a society, or at least in this moment in time, we are dealing with loneliness. Loneliness is becoming an epidemic in our world. So, for example, the Kaiser Family Foundation conducted a study in 2018, and what this study found was that 22% of people in the US feel often or always lonely and isolated. So when I look at that number, 22%, it's a little under a quarter of the population. However, what that translates to into individual people is 55 million people in the United States. So 55 million of us are moving through the world feeling often alone or isolated. And that's concerning for sure. In another study by UCLA, I believe it was in 2017, what this study found was that 1 in 3 individuals in the US over the age of 45 feels lonely often and throughout their week. And so this also points to different ages and stages can play a role in how lonely we feel. And I'm sure we could hypothesize why people in middle age start to feel lonelier, but it definitely can play a role. So if there's such a strong case, what gets in the way? There are a few bullet points. Okay. Yes, and then one more. Yep, awesome. Oh. So pace and expectations regarding success and productivity definitely get in the way. And what I mean by this is that in our culture, our pace is fast, our work days are long, and our work weeks are long. And I think a lot of the time, and this isn't true across the board, but a lot of the time, the rewards that we see or that we're taught to seek are for the things that we do. So rewards are for doing as opposed to just simply being together, being who we are, making mistakes, and being okay with those things. So expectations regarding success and productivity are focused around that rather than simply being genuine and connected. And then the next piece, stigma. So that there's a stigma regarding being vulnerable and needing others in our society, and again, not across the board, but our culture in the US is often seen as a culture of independence. And a negative side effect of promoting independence or having a cultural value of independence is that sometimes what happens is that we devalue interdependence and we devalue connecting, reaching out for help, because connection does take some vulnerability, and not vulnerability like it's dangerous, but vulnerability in the sense that we risk emotional exposure when we say, hey, I'm struggling, I could really use a conversation or a coffee or something with you today. And the other side is true too, that it is a vulnerable process to stop and see your coworker and say, you look a little sad today, is everything all right? So so stigma can get in the way of that. And then the third piece that gets in the way is technology that does not enhance our in-person connections. So I know there are so many articles and so many conversations going around regarding the pluses and minuses of technology and social media. And I agree, it's definitely a mixed bag. And so one of the chapters in the book discusses the different types of relationships and friendships that we have. And so Dr. Murphy talks about so our circles of relationships. So we have an inner circle of relationships that consists of, you know, just what it says, our inner circle, people closest to us, the people that matter the most, that we are the most open and most vulnerable with. We have this inner circle. And I believe he says that consists of really just a small handful of people. It's not large. And so then the middle circle, so you move out from the inner circle to the middle circle. And these are your friendships, your neighbors, your people that you don't know all of their intimacies, but you know enough about them. And you have interactions, and you know, you might invite them over for dinner or might participate in an activity with them. And then the third circle is your outer circle. So these are definitely more acquaintances or people that maybe moved away that you keep in contact with, or family that you keep in contact with maybe once a year or twice a year, that kind of thing. So what studies have found is that technology and social media can be very, very helpful if it keeps us connected to our inner circle or connected to in-person relationships. What the studies have also found is that social media is shifting the way we spend energy on our circles of connection. And so one phenomenon that is happening is that when we're on social media, we are spending more and more time and energy on our outer circle of friends. And the concern is that the more time we spend on this outer circle through social media, we are spending less energy on our inner circles. So it actually could be at the expense of our inner circle that requires energy and care and attention. And so that's something to think about, that it isn't all bad. But I encourage people to think about how they use social media, how they feel afterwards, and does it enhance their inner circle and their in-person connections. Next slide. So strengthening connections. How do we go about strengthening connections in our everyday lives? And so this piece, I think you'll find evidence of it in the book, but this is where I just kind of draw on my own expertise and my own knowledge that I have to offer. And so I was just wanted to come up with a list of ways to strengthen connections that really honors, again, that mind, body, spirit connection, and that connection of caring for ourselves internally, by and large, helps us care for people externally. So oftentimes when we think of self-care, we think of, people will ask me, well, isn't that selfish? Isn't that self-centered? But really, when we care and we nurture ourselves, we are able to care better and nurture the people that we love and that are in our lives. So some things to consider: slowing down, taking time to listen to others, to understand, to offer our undivided attention. And that also comes with balanced technology habits as well. So there's a term in the book, which I love and have used a lot since I read the book, and it's called phubbing. So Phubbing. And what that refers to is phone snubbing. So it's the phubbing or the phone snubbing that we do when we are engaged in a conversation or talking to other people, but we have our phone on the table and we're glancing down at our text, or we're texting and maintaining eye contact and thinking that, we're still engaged, but really we're splitting our attention between our phones and our people in front of us. So slowing down, taking time, putting your phone away, and really giving that undivided attention, which I think in a lot of ways we're becoming accustomed to not doing that. So I strive for it with myself. It is an effort for myself, but I also encourage other people to settle in to what that feels like, to slow down and have the conversation. And then also check in with ourselves. What do I need? What do I feel? What do I want throughout the day? And take some time to reflect on your values, on where your health is at. Is there an appointment that you need to make? Is it time for that well check? Is it time for the mammogram? Is it just, are there things that you need to do to care for yourself or to care for others in your life? Let's see, what else? The holistic piece again. And then the other piece, in addition, it kind of piggybacks on the making the appointments, is reaching out for help and support when you need it. That is part of the human process. That is part of our growth and development as people, is our interdependence on others. And so reaching out for professional help when you need it, asking for social support, seeking those opportunities for growth, the workshops or the class, or whatever the case might be. Next slide. And so this is the action toolkit. And again, just a list that I came up with of different ways to care for your relationships and to care for yourself from a connection standpoint. And I just encourage you to read through these to see what stands out to you. Is there anything that you might be interested in trying or doing, practicing? So again, I was looking at that holistic piece. What do we need as whole people from a spiritual standpoint, physical, emotional, mental health, social, all of it. And these suggestions offer a little bit of everything in that regard. So let's see. And I think the biggest thing for this is progress over perfection. So if you decide to take a deep breath in and out, do 3 cycles of deep breathing today, and you didn't do that yesterday, then your efforts are at 100%. And so that is definitely a win. So progress over perfection. And I encourage those watching to maybe choose one of these or think of an area that you want to give a little attention to this week. And that's it. And that's the end. So thank you so much for signing on and for watching this talk. And I wish you well as you go forth and connect with others.